All right, we're back with the program. It's Gerald coming right back at you here. One thing we don't talk enough about here on the program is horror movies. I know we delve into it every now and then, and obviously the importance of it when it comes to the movie industry, especially the fact that horror movies really, for the most part, are some of the safest bets when it comes to Hollywood because of the fact that most of them, anyways, are very low in cost. Usually, a minimal amount is needed for as far as publication, for distribution, for advertising, and things of that nature. But usually, there is initial high returns in the first 2, 3 weeks of release that will give it a nice boost in profit. No, you don't see the $1 billion movies from those type of entities, but you do see quite often 70, 80, 90, 100, $200, 200 multi-million dollar releases that come out with the fans just keyed in on horror franchises. So I thought I'd cover the first few horror franchise movies of the new year, along with my good friend, who is our resident horror expert. You got to check out everything that's going on with his awesome podcast, Hunnicween, at Podbean and so many other different podcast outlets, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and so much more. It is my good friend, Mr. Jason Todd Fineburgh. Always great to have you on the show, my friend.
And thank God that both Florida and Vegas have not been succumbed to the cold weather.
Exactly. We don't really get too much of an Arctic freeze. I think an Arctic freeze for us is probably 30. So
Yeah.
it's not really a whole much to speak of. Although I will tell you, earlier this month, I was in New Mexico and it was freezing cold, below freezing. So I got a little bit of taste of that. But my hearts go out to all those affected by the Arctic freeze in the Midwest and all those states affected and areas affected by that. But getting back to what we were talking about, it all starts this week when it comes to horror movies, and the horror movie genre really kicks off. Yes, you could say Escape Room was the first horror movie of the year, but that really didn't connect well with audiences. But The Prodigy is the first, I guess, horror movie in a little while, in over about, I guess at that time, about a month, to really come out and connect with audiences. At least it has that possibility. Your thoughts on on the horror movie scene for early 2019, starting with The Prodigy.
Here's the thing, though, is that this started in the early 2000s with these late January, early February, or August to September horror films about evil kids. Now, we could go back to the 70s with The Omen, or even further with, what was it? The Bad Seed. But we fast forward now with these movie posters where they're black and white and there's something wrong with the kid, and you speed up the film and you slow it down and you have all the jump scares. I'm not a fan of these type of horror films where they're taking place in the middle of nowhere. They can be anywhere USA, or they're somewhere in a dilapidated castle in England. They don't jive with me that much. Now there's been like maybe one or two. There is The Orphan, there is Mama.
Well, actually, I want to ask you, it's something coming out later this year, Brightburn.
Yes, we were going to get to that. Yes,
Okay,
yes.
so
Brightburn. I'm pocketing Brightburn. I'll save that. I guess whatever order we're going in right now. But yeah, and that's an interesting one as well. But the thing is with these evil kids, I don't know if somebody just woke up one morning and said, "Hey, remember The Omen when we tried to remake it in June 6, 2006, 666, get it?" And they've been trying to do that ever since. It doesn't work. And unfortunately, it's going up against, it is going up against Lego Movie 2. And it's going up against another Liam Neeson vigilante film called Pursuit, and What Men Want, which is pretty much a female version of What Women Want with Helen Hunt and Mel Gibson. So you got two of those movies that are contenders. I do not, especially if you're going against Lego Movie 2 and you're going against another evil kid movie that is just Enigma. No, not Enigma. God, sorry, my jaw
Enigma.
locked up.
There you go.
Yeah,
Oh, no worries.
that's it. Sorry, my jaw locked up, folks. The problem is that everything is cryptic and it should be interesting and scary, but it's just, again, I go back to what I say around and around and around. It feels like an Omen meets Annabelle clone, and it just is not going to jive for me.
One thing I also want to ask you when it comes to February's horror release, the other horror release I think of note is Happy Death Day to You. And the only reason I say for that is the fact that there was a public campaign by shooting victims, their parents, and to get the movie moved off of the Valentine's Day release date, and it was successful in a way, but really was only a matter of a day that it changed. So it's still coming out February 13th. Happy Death Day to You. Do you think that's something that's really going to jive with Valentine's Day audiences? Audiences, people going out on dates, they want to take their significant other to a nice movie. And do you think Happy Death Day to You will actually fit the bill?
Okay, let me just say right here and right now, when I saw the trailer for this and it was shoved in my face a lot about a year and a half ago, if you can believe it that long, a lot of people just said it was a horror version of Groundhog Day, where Bill Murray would die a lot in the middle of that movie and just keep coming back until he got the day right. But the only twist with Happy Death Day is the character just had a power that could die, but eventually, I think she was dying slowly. The sequel, I don't know how she's able to maintain that power. I don't know. Does one have anything to do with the other with the school shootings? Again, these are fictional characters compared to what went on in REL life. Now, I'm not saying that the ends justify the means, but I don't think Hollywood is trying to be cruel about what happened to these victims. Again, this is taking place in a fictionalized school with a sorority girl that was a bitch, and she was getting her comeuppance and she's trying to change herself. And now whoever this new killer is going after her friends. So I understand what's going on with a lot of school shootings, and I understand that it is extremely tragic, and I understand that the anniversary is coming up. But again, there are a lot of movies that have been pushed back over the years because of September 11th, or because, again, I think Bruce Willis's
Death Wish
Death
was
Wish,
actually
yeah,
moved.
right, that was moved as well because of school shootings and violence. Again, I'm not trying to be cruel, but one has nothing to do, there's no inspiration that's coming from what's going on with these kids. I mean, school shootings have been bigger, have gotten much bigger since Columbine. I think we all know that. So when the Matrix movies came out, they didn't get pushed back because the kids claimed that they were inspired by the Matrix movies. It just, unfortunately, was just a sad coincidence. I don't think pushing Happy Death Day to You is trying to influence anyone to shoot up a school. I don't think one has anything to do with the other. And unfortunately, when it comes to these type of now these are teenage slasher movies. These are different than the ones from the 80s that we grew up on. These are teenage slasher movies where we have urban legend and scream. And I understand that, again, these characters are mentally ill, and in REO life, we have characters that are mentally ill. But again, I don't think one is trying to take from the other and trying to pour more gasoline on the fire. I think this is just trying to tell. I mean, there are so many of these slasher movies that are telling stories, and then we see the real life dangers and the real life killers. But again, I think there's enough people with common sense that can tell fact from fiction, are not trying to blame this one movie compared to what happened in not one but several school shootings over the years. I wouldn't just pick one. I mean, I think that in all honesty and in fairness, we should go back to Columbine and really pick about how these school shootings are progressing. So I don't really know if it's going to help this movie or hurt this movie. I think what it's really going to come down to is you care about the characters, which, in all honesty, when I saw Happy Death Day, just out of curiosity, I really didn't care about any of the characters. I don't want them wiped off the face of the earth, but they weren't that interesting. They're just taking something from that 20-second montage from Groundhog Day and going with that. So I don't think, again, finalizing it, going around and around and around, No, I don't think one has anything to do with the other, and I don't think this movie should have been pushed back. But no, I don't think it's trying to put salt on the wound when it has to deal with what has happened over, in the world.
I also don't think it's going to score really high with audiences because I just don't think the timing is going to jive right. I don't think Valentine's Day is just the greatest time in the world to put out a horror movie, especially the fact that a lot of people are searching for romance and other type of films during that course of time.
You'd
Plus,
be surprised. There are a lot of single people out there, though. I mean, don't forget there are.
yeah, that's true.
I hate to say it though. I'm one of them, and it's difficult. I don't really want to. If I'm not taking a date, it's not a perfect date movie, but I guess you'd be surprised how many people go to these movies and go on date night to see Happy Death Day. There are a lot of horror fans, there are a lot of slasher fans. You'd be surprised how many couples go to these type of movies, but it's also single people that'll go as well. So I don't think one has anything to do with the other Valentine's Day as well. I think
What
this
do you
movie
think
could have been
Lego Movie 2 might actually have more to do with it because it will only be in its second week?
Lego Movie 2, I think because it's from the people that gave us Spider-Verse. Enough said. And of course, Spider Verse has killed it at the box office and has won several awards for Best Picture at Golden Globes, British Film, Screen Actors Guild. I don't think that this is going to see that. It's going to make a profit. But I think when you get the people who made Lego Movie 1, Lego Movie 2, and Spider Verse, no, this is going to blow it out the water anyway. It'll probably be in the top five and over time make its money back through video. But going back to the story itself, besides everything else that's happening, I just don't find it to be an interesting story.
Fair enough. Fair enough. In March, the only entry for horror movies is Climax, which from A24 they do and deal with a lot of horror movies and smaller budget movies, but there's no type of release frame as far as how many theaters it's going to be distributed to. So that shows me already that if they're not confident in making it a wide release, it may just be something that's going to be out of the theaters real quickly. So I guess the next major horror movie that's going to be on the queue comes up in April in Pet Sematary, the remake from the Stephen King novel, and also a reimagining of what we once saw in the 90s with Pet Sematary, the original. So I want to hear your thoughts on this new version of Pet Sematary because of the fact that it is a reimagining of that horror classic from Stephen King that a lot of people found so dearly. People are like touch and go, hit or miss as far as the original version that came to the movies of Pet Sematary. It depends on who you talk to. When I saw it, I thought it was okay. I wasn't overwhelmed by it. But your thoughts on the new version of Pet Sematary because it's going to hit in April in theaters.
Well, here's the thing. Actually, it came out in '89, the original, but yeah, this was the last great '80s horror film. If anybody does say so themselves, and by anybody, film critics and fans. But for me, I read the book because I was a huge Stephen King fan, and in the '80s, there was this huge Stephen King book club that was advertised a lot on TV. And when Pet Cemetery, the movie, came out, they would show clips of Church and Gage. And here's the thing about Pet Cemetery and why it works so well and why Stephen King will always be a master of horror. You're always right about what you know. And in REAL life, Stephen King's son almost died by getting hit by a truck. And Stephen King decided to write the story and say, well, what was the worst case scenario? The movie has not aged as well as I had hoped, and I have the documentary as well. Uh, the sequel came out. The less we talk about Pet Sematary 2, the better. But as for this trailer that I've seen, here's the problem. Fred Gwynn was Judd. And as for the kid who played Gage, no, Gage, it was Gage, 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 right? It wasn't Gaged. It wasn't with an ED, I think.
No, I don't think it was just Gage.
It was Gage, yeah. As for the little kid who played Gage, he was awesome. He also would go on to be in Wes Craven's New Nightmare as Heather Langenkamp's son. So he there's a great story if you get the Pet Cemetery documentary on how they had to feed him the lines because he was only about 3 or 4 at the time, and with his speech impediment, kind of like with mine, like he would now I want to play with you, and of course we had the cat and the animatronic, but it went down to Fred Gwynn's performance as Judd. That's the one thing that I'll always remember. The book was really more about a philosophical and psychological discussion on death and resurrection, and also desecrating the Indian burial ground of the Knickknacks. And a lot of people thought that was a joke. No, that was an actual tribe. I mean, I know they're called Knickknacks, but that they were real, and they were not happy when their names were used for this movie. I don't think anybody asked for a reimagining. There was no reason for it. It did well at the box office, enough for it to get a sequel and to have Mary Lambert direct the original and the sequel. But I don't know what this reimagining is really going to tell and why we need to have it again with creepy kids. They're in this marching band wearing animal masks, kind of like with the WWE with the Wyatt family. We don't need all of that. What made it scary was the fact that this family seemed to be in the middle of nowhere. They didn't build a fence. The kid went out in the middle of the road, got hit by a truck, and the father wanted to do anything to bring the kid back. He buried him in this pet cemetery. The kid comes back as a zombie, and that's it. The ground is sour, and it kills people. Although in the book, when you buried people and they came back, they would just gossip about you. That was it. They weren't killers. Gage was a killer for reasons I'm still not sure why, and the ending is also up in the air. It was more of a cliffhanger ending. It wasn't like a WTF ending in the movie. But as much as I would love to see Dick from Third Rock from the Sun, we all know Mr. John Lithgow as Judd, I don't really think he has that cadence or performance to give a New England accent. I just feel this is going to be a big budget film that nobody wanted or asked for. And, not only sometimes that is better, sometimes I think the book is better, or sometimes I think, dare I say it, even though I hadn't seen it in years, the original is better. I don't understand for the life of me, other than this is a tax write off, why they want to touch Pet Cemetery.
Well, the movie is also coming out. It's coming out the weekend of April the 5th, from what I'm seeing, and it's also coming out opposite Shazam. That's also not boding well for the movie, and I think that it's going to suffer widely because even though it's a wide release for Paramount, going up against Shazam with a lot of good buzz going into the film for Shazam, I think Shazam could be a breakout hit, or has at least the possibility of doing so, because there's a lot of good word on it until the reviews come out, of course. I think Shazam could hold up very strong, and that would mean bad news for Pet Sematary, the remake.
Well, this is what I'm not understanding either, because I don't know why Hollywood execs, first of all, for the month of April, not only getting Shazam, we're also going to be getting the second part of Infinity War.
And also Hellboy.
And Hellboy.
Totally, and I'm sorry to Josh, my co-host Josh, who's a huge Hellboy fan. I already told him already, that's going to be a tough month for Hellboy to try and get any type of money out of there.
Well, no, because first of all, we don't have Ron Perlman. We don't have Benicio, forget it. Not Benicio.
That's another story for another day.
Yes, yeah, exactly. We don't have who we want, so I've seen the trailer for that. No, but I don't quite understand having Pet Sematary go against Shazam, especially as Aquaman did well and then some, and we all made fun of it. I don't really see how this movie's even going to stand on any legs. I think it's just going to stay buried and nothing's going to resurrect it or bring it back. But we have another Stephen King movie that will be coming out, and I know we'll talk about that shortly as well. But I think, is Brightburn next, or the New Mutants, or that's never coming out?
Well, actually, I want to get your thoughts on the next one, because I want to talk about two more main movies for our preview for the first half of 2019. And once again, I'm on with Jason Todd Fineburgh of Hunnicween. You got to check out his awesome pop culture podcast every single time you check it out on Podbean. It's Hunnicween and also Apple Podcasts and so many other different podcast outlets. The next major wide release for horror movie on that list comes out just a week before Avengers Endgame, and it's The Curse of La Llorona. So The Curse of La Llorona, if I'm trying to say that correctly, and I'm trying my best to do so. Tell me, do you know anything about that one? Because it is from Warner Brothers and New Line. It is a wide release, and it's coming out, I think, at a time when I think Pet Sematary should have come out, if it's coming out in April, and all by itself the week before Avengers Endgame.
Yeah, this seems to be one of those movies that may be a pleasant surprise. It should come to no surprise that you have the person who gave us The Children, which was a very interesting international horror film about killer children that were possessed by demons. It's another ghost story that takes place in Latin America. You get a lot of these Latin American folklores. And whether or not this is going to be about the chupacabra, or whether or not this is going to be about demons, or whatever the supernatural entity is going to be, I have a lot of faith in Michael Chavis. Huge fan of his. Got to get to him another time. But I think when it comes to these type of movies where it's not just humans that are going, it's not amiable horror. Let's put it that way.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Oh, go ahead.
You're actually going to have it where some of the ghosts are actually the good guys. So you're actually going to have ghosts with humans helping humans rescue children from an evil supernatural entity.
Ooh, an interesting little twist there.
And I think, there are all these stories about weeping women. So I think this will be an interesting story as well. Now, again, it's 1/6 half dozen the other, but I have a lot of faith in this film.
But it sounds like it's got a good pedigree behind it, and it got a lot of even though we haven't seen much of it yet or heard about much of it yet, I think in the coming months beforehand we are going to hear a lot more about The Curse of La Llorona. And
now, I just want to say one other thing too about La Llorona is that if it is who I think it is as well, there are these weeping women out there that like to take children. So she will be one of the villains, but I don't think she's going to be the main villain. Now, I know this is The Curse of La Llorona, but I don't really think she's going to be the major, because reading about her, and I have studied her a few times, sometimes she's tragic and sometimes she's a demon, depending on how you read the folklore into her. But
fair enough.
But yeah, I think you're really going to. It's definitely going to be kind of like a Poltergeist meets Harry Potter.
Well, there you go. Very interesting indeed. Last on the list that I want to talk to you about on our preview of the first half of 2019, the horror movies that are coming out. And once again, it's Jason Todd Fineburgh from Hunnicween. I want to ask you about Brightburn. I mentioned it briefly beforehand, but I want to go into a little bit more detail. Your thoughts on this different twist to the horror genre it still deals with a young child like we're seeing with The Prodigy, and it does deal with the Midwest, but it does have a similar type feel as far as if Superman went bad when it comes to Brightburn.
Well, this is like if, the Kents adopted General Zod. That's what a lot of people are saying. James Gunn is producing this one. The only thing I can tell you is that I don't think this movie is going to end well unless there's going to be a sequel, unless they actually kill this thing. It's a shame that it's not going to be taking place in the DC universe, it would be awesome. I've heard rumors that James Gunn was supposed to be working on Suicide Squad 2.
Oh, he is announced as the director.
He is. Is it official though? I mean,
Yeah,
official,
I
official.
I
Okay.
believe it is official. Yesterday, DC did some major shakeups to its schedule, dealing with the Batfleck no longer being part of the DC universe and going ahead with what is being described as a younger version of Batman in the DC universe when the Batman comes out in 2021, which they gave an official date to, and then also Suicide Squad 2. And they did, I believe, announce officially that James Gunn is in the saddle for that one.
Well, I hope so because this would really help the DC extended universe, especially if you get James Gunn. But Brightburn, the only thing about this is that a couple years ago there was this $10 DC horror comic book in which Superman did come to Earth, but he was evil and only spoke in Kryptonian, killed Pa Kent right away, and killed Ma Kent as well. And they were actually in their 40s when this was going on. And it takes place in the present. So she kind of looked like Aunt May from the MCU. But not, here or there, I don't know how well this is going to work because unless this actually was Zod, I think this is going to be a one off film. I don't really think this is going to be unless they bring in a fictional superhero to fight Brightburn. I don't know how this is going to work. I think this is just a fanfic of, well, what if Zod came to Earth instead of Clark? That's or Kal El. That's the only way that I see this working. But I think this is going to be like 20 minutes of fan fiction, 30 minutes of horror, and then 20 minutes of wrapping everything up and going. There you go. So I'm not really too stoked about this one, other than I'm glad that James Gunn is still working.
Well, it is coming out in the latter part of May, near the Memorial Day weekend, not on that weekend, but just beforehand. So that means it might actually get a nice little boost from that Memorial Day weekend. But as I've spoken about several times before in the past, the Memorial Day weekend has never been a given when it comes to movies. In fact, the last two Disney movies to appear on the Memorial Day weekend have both not performed anywhere near the level of expectations that there were for it. So we could see something like Brightburn actually poke out of the pack during that latter part of the May month cycle and hit with audiences if it's anywhere decent and the concept does get over with fans. But you're right, it could very well end up being a one-off if it's not done correctly, even though James Gunn does have a little bit of a say as far as producer is concerned. Brightburn could be like that major hit or miss for the horror genre. We're going to have to wait and see. I know there's another half of 2019 that we're going to talk about coming up later in the year when it comes to all the movies, including It Chapter 2 and so much more when it comes to horror genre. But any last thoughts from you on the way out when it concerns the horror movies for the first part of 2019?
Well, there's another one that I'm kind of curious about, Us, that of course we have from our good friend who gave us Get Out.
Jordan Peele, awesome,
Yes.
awesome director. And yes, this is something that has actually interested a great many people with a tremendous trailer that dropped not too long ago.
Yeah, I saw the trailer actually when I saw Vice, and I have to admit, Get Out was a nice little horror film that came out of nowhere. Us seems to be, because I know that he wanted to bring back his version of Twilight Zone, and this kind of reminds me of a Twilight Zone episode in the first season where a woman does meet her doppelganger from an alternate universe, and one can't live while the other one is alive, which pretty much means is that either the evil has to kill the good or the good has to kill the evil, but both can't live in the same universe. And that's pretty much what Us is going to be, is that this family meets evil versions of themselves and they have to kill them, otherwise one can't live while the other one is alive, because there that seems to be the rules that they can't live in the same universe together. So
And that movie's coming out March 22nd to theaters. That movie is obviously something that, like you said, with the pedigree of Jordan Peele and the fact that he's coming off one of the best movies of 2017, and with Get Out, got so much acclaim, awards everywhere, nominations everywhere else. Just a great showing for that movie, and us being the next in the line from him. I definitely expect big things from that movie as well.
now there's also New Mutants, which I think is coming out in August. It keeps getting pushed back, and I know that with the Disney Fox merger, that the agreement was that Fox can finish a couple other movies that are under their belt before Disney is taking over in a few months, but there'll still be like New Mutants and Deadpool 3, and I think X-Men Dark Phoenix. So those are the three. And then after that, everything will be MCU. But that's not going to be a good thing because if New Mutants does work, although I've heard that this movie has been they've been reshooting scenes several times to either make it more scary or less scary. I've seen the trailer. I've read the comics. I don't know. This could just be Fant Four fic. You know, the Fantastic Four 2015 flop. I just don't. I think this was just and between Dark Phoenix, I think there's just 20th Century Fox that was hoping to hold on to rights, but now that Disney has bought everything under the sun, I don't really think New Mutants is going to make a difference. It Chapter 2.
Well, before we get into that, you and I are actually going to be coming back and talking about the movies of the second half of 2019.
Okay.
So save all that good stuff. I got to bring you back on before then to talk all the good stuff on the latter half
Oh,
of
right.
2019.
Yeah, that's right.
Plus,
Yeah.
plus, I want to bring you on here in a few weeks' time to talk about more stuff, pop culture. Your thoughts on what's going on with all with all the superhero stuff. Your thoughts on everything going on in pop culture. I got to get some input from you on what's going with the DC and Marvel universes, because tell you what, it's not just about horror movies when it comes to Hunnicween. He knows the stuff when it comes to all things pop culture. And also, if you get a chance, you got to check out his awesome podcast, Hunnicween. Jason, tell us out there and tell everyone out there why Hunnicween is an awesome show to listen to. I've enjoyed it, and I know others will as well.
Because I worked really hard on it. I don't know. Because I blackmailed you. I have no idea anymore. Look, all I can say is that I have a lot of great friends who have come and gone on the series. I'm on a very small hiatus for a few months because I'm just finishing up my bachelor's of nursing, and my other hosts, Kendra and Edward Hale, they needed some needed time off. They purchased a brand new house and they started new careers. So we're just taking a very small breather, but we're going to be popping up every now and then for March and April, because we do want to give our thoughts on Infinity War. And I'm actually going to be at a comic book convention, none other than Comic-Con Revolution. And I'm going to be interviewing Don Rassa, who wrote the Uncle Scrooge comics, especially The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck. And I'll be interviewing Jimmy Palante and Amanda Connor, who worked on the first several issues of Harley Quinn, as well as our good friend who was the co-creator of Deadpool, none other. Hold on, I have the name right here. I know I just lost it. This will be good in editing. Oh, crap.
No worries, my friend.
This doesn't make me look good.
You're good.
This is why you should not be listening to Hunnicween. Oh crap! I just had him. Shoot. Okay, we'll just leave in Jimmy Palante and Amanda Connor and Don Rosser for now. I'll find his name later. My brain just locked up on that one. Now that's good. That's why Hunnicween sucks. That's why we're going down in the ratings. No. Anyway, the bottom line is.
Are you talking about Rob Liefeld?
Yes, that's him. Yes, he's going to be, as well as hopefully I'm trying to get Jake Roberts as well. Jake the Snake Roberts. He's going to be there as well. I got my press pass, so show, and hopefully I get to interview them for a few minutes more.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Be interesting to hear about Jake the Snake Roberts' life. I know he frequents Las Vegas a bit, but it'd be great to hear his life now that he's gotten rid of many of the demons in his life, and how he perceives his life now going into a different stage. So that ought to be interesting to hear. Once
Oh,
again, it is Jason Todd Fineburgh from Hunnicween. You got to check out his awesome podcast and all of his back episodes on Podbean and so many other podcast outlets. But Jason, I am getting you on with your thoughts on the DC and Marvel universe as it happens, and I want to hear your thoughts on that. So you'll be coming back on the show, hopefully, to give us more updates and analysis and insight on everything going on in pop culture as well.
the last thing I'm going to say about this whole DC versus Marvel. Now I think I'll give you a little taste. I think now there's going to be a fight. Thankfully, due to Aquaman killing it at the box office, surprisingly. Wonder Woman, well, thank God she did okay. And this Birds of Prey premise, I think DC will have some legs. With Marvel, the biggest one right now is going to be Captain Marvel has a lot of controversy. We have the sequel to Infinity War as well as Spider-Man, and I really enjoyed that trailer. So after we get Infinity War, and I guess we're going to get a whole new slew of MCU phases and new characters because I think old are leaving and new are coming in. Yeah, this is going to be a huge, huge, huge discussion. I don't
I'm
even know where
looking
to begin with this. Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to it myself. And it's always great to have you on the show, my friend, talking horror, pop culture, or anything else you want to talk about. As always, just great to have you part of the pop culture cosmos.